So the United States had its GOP or Republican debates recently. It's quite clear that the GOP, the Republicans, are looking to Vivek as their version of Obama. There's a clip circulating that compares what Vivek said to something Obama said, and it's being used to malign him when in fact it's very clear that the GOP has taken a page out of the Democratic playbook that was so successful a few years ago, quite some time ago. It also makes sense because Vivek is essentially a version of Donald Trump, and so if something happens to Trump, where he's left off the ballot in a couple of states or whatnot, then they've got someone with similar ideas and hopefully, in their minds, similar appeal. So the problem is that I didn't even watch the debates. It's not something that I cared about, primarily because I haven't heard anybody say what I really want them to say, which is, here we are, we're making a spectacle of ourselves, and we're denigrating the reputation of our country by doing what we're doing, by bickering, by not addressing the issues. And what really matters are the people out there, not even people out here, because the people out there in their homes, taking care of their families, who've just come home exhausted from a long day of work, those are the people that matter. And those people rely on us, the politicians, to do our jobs, preserving America's reputation, hopefully as quietly as possible. Politicians, I suppose, ought to be like insurance companies. You don't want them to be loud and bombastic. You want them to be there when things fail so they can, replenish the process and make things whole again. You want them to be able to set regulations that make sense and that are cost effective. And what you see now, you see a lot of people who are not necessarily demagogues, but who would be out of place in a country like Singapore. And what the United States really needs is to be more Singaporean. And the problem is most Americans couldn't find Singapore on a map, despite the fact that the United States is the largest investor in this country right here. And, it's really interesting being here because, there is a presidential election coming up here. And there are three candidates, but really it's between two of them, Tharman and Song. And both of them are qualified and good people. Both of them would make Singaporeans proud to be Singaporean. And as an American citizen in Singapore, it's really odd to be here in a country that works politically and compare this tiny red dot with what's happening in the United States, where you have the appearance of diversity, but with more bombast. Obama won, not because he was bombastic, quite the opposite. When he was baited into discussing racism against, I believe, John Edwards, it was Edwards, the Caucasian lawyer, that pounced on the issue to rally the base and the minority voters, whereas Obama sort of deflected. And that's been a criticism of Obama, that he does tend to deflect on the major issues. And because of that, did not take a firm stand against, the military-industrial complex and so on and so forth. And, of course, it was Obama that called or allowed the assassination of a U.S. citizen overseas without due process. It was Obama who promised to shut down Guantanamo Bay and yet left it open. In what most people would consider to be a violation of, again, due process. What makes Vivek so interesting from a GOP analysis or angle is that he's like Obama, but probably somebody who could stand up to the military-industrial complex. And that makes him as good as Trump in terms of popular appeal to the GOP base. And so the GOP, for the first time, has a strategy. It's either it wants to run against Joseph Biden. If something happens to Biden or Trump, then they've got somebody in the wings to step up and be their version of Obama. But regardless of who wins, the United States, again, needs to think about being more like Singapore and less like, I don't know. See, I don't know how even to describe the United States and the political scene, because I haven't seen anything like it growing up. This sort of anti-immigrant, border control, so on and so forth. These are all issues that are important, but they're becoming the focal point of election campaigns. And in my lifetime, I haven't really seen these sorts of things. Singapore has a border. It enforces that border. It's got a lot of unpopular stances. It enforces the death penalty for minor possessions of drugs. And yet, again, because people trust the government and the reputation of the government, the PAP, the ruling party, can pretty much do what it wants. And the people will follow, essentially. That's not because they are conformists, because of the reputation that the ruling party has built for the last several decades. So I think that the United States needs to think about building up its reputation again. So the idea isn't to make America great again. The idea has to be to regain America's reputation, or good reputation, again. And that's something that's happened before. When Nixon demolished the reputation of the United States, Jimmy Carter won it back. Now, obviously, when Trump hindered the reputation of the United States, Joseph Biden has not done anything to recover that reputation for the United States. So we're still waiting for someone to recover the reputation of the United States. And the great thing about being in Singapore, regardless of who wins, the reputation of the country is intact. That's why the election isn't really that big of a deal here. And so you don't have people trying to be divisive. You've got people trying to debate whether or not they should let cats into these apartment complexes. Right now, you can have like one dog, but not cats for whatever reason. So again, instead of making America great again, it's time to get America's good reputation back. And it's doubtful that anybody on the stage on either side is going to be able to do that without a change in philosophy. And that's something that made Obama so tempting, is that he did represent a change, at least on the surface. Now the question is whether or not the GOP is going to be able to bring about a change that's more substantial.